Hello, I am Cassie Pialetti, and our reading was Defuturing the Image of the Future by Andrew Blovout. To thoroughly discuss the topics that were covered in this reading, we first need to take a look at our overview for the upcoming discussion. What we'll be looking at today will cover the question, what is the term defuture, the history and evolution of the image of the future, the role that international fairs and expositions play in this topic, and the inner workings of the future and defuture. So what does defuture mean? Well, the basic definition of the term that I gathered from the reading is that to create a defuture means to take away a possible future for a specific group or society through the advancement or emergement of a man-made technology, design, or standard. Now, in and of itself, this can be a little difficult to understand, so it is important to look at examples of this in our past and current society. An example that was brought up in the reading is the defuturing of indigenous tribes and cultures through the wiping of their history from society. We can see evidence of this all around us. We can see how this stems from the very beginning when the indigenous were colonized and kicked out of their land due to Western expansion and the idea that these people were less than. And we can see how it is played into our society now too, when we see how they have been diffused out of historical conversations. Another example of this action would be the ongoing conversation surrounding book bans across the country. These bans primarily deal with books covering topics of race, gender, and sexuality, and the danger of these bans is that if they are taken out of educational systems, then the historical context that lives in them may be erased. Within the topic also lies another subcategory, which is design features. Design features, such as automobiles, have the potential to progress our society and open us up to new possible futures, while also taking away and limiting other futures from occurring. An example that is used in the text is the automobile industry. Our world progressed a great deal with this technology, and it skyrocketed our societies into something completely different with entirely new possibilities. However, not all changes were positive. The automobile created a much more efficient mode of transportation. People could travel from one place to another in record time compared to before, and goods could be transported at a much faster rate as well. Realistically, this was a major positive development for our society. Without the introduction of this technology, the economy would be less strong, and the rate that it took to complete work would be much slower than today. But we need to look at the downsides that came out of this development. The design of the automobile directly relates to the blueprint that is needed for consequent designs, such as the highways and cities that dramatically alter the landscape they sit on. Deforestation has had a major impact on our wildlife, especially in areas where cities continue to expand. The air pollution that has come out of these cars also directly contributes to the ongoing battle with climate change and global warming. Due to these changes, certain futures are completely out of the question because of irreversible damage. There has been progress made with the production of electric vehicles, but this is not a switch that will entirely occur overnight or even over the next decade. A transition like this is one that we will see slowly start to become more common in society as they become more accessible and popular, but that does not reverse the defuturing that has already occurred. The history of defuturing and how it aligns with the image of the future is also very interesting. When we look back in time, defuturing has always been around in some sense. It was just a lot less apparent than it is now due to evolving technologies and the fact that the term hasn't been exactly coined yet. During the Victorian eras and stemming into the 20th century, there were international fairs and expositions placed around the world that would showcase various people's thoughts and ideas of what the future decades were to hold. In the beginning, society was still deeply rooted in religion, and it was often a big factor in all beliefs. Because of this, there was always a more positive outlook on the future. People were more concerned and hopeful for what is to come after death, until we began to stray a little bit away from that idea, and that is when utopias began to appear. People became more hopeful to find peace on earth before peace after death. Fred Pollack talks about this in the reading when he says that the future during these fairs and in the media was commonly looked at in comparison to the past. When they had a positive future to look at, their technologies and depictions were more positive. But when we started to become more fearful of the damage we have caused to Earth, that is when the utopias began to turn into dystopian futures. The Maze Runner, Divergent, and The Hunger Games are all examples of extremely popular movie franchises centered around a futuristic dystopian world. The events that take place in these films are all extremely tragic and show the world in a state of distress due to too much human intervention. We see how designs and technology have taken society and nature past the point of return, and it is up to the heroes to destroy what has been done in an attempt to restore peace to the land. In The Maze Runner, we see the world destroyed by a man-made disease. In Divergent, the creation of factions separated the people, and in The Hunger Games, over-surveillance and political uprisings were the reason for their demise. While these films take place far into the future, it is becoming a real concern that defuturing is taking us closer and closer to the realities seen in these films. People are fearful of the lasting effects of climate change, and even more so beginning to have a growing fear of how technologies and designs such as AI are going to play into our lives. Pollack passed away before he could see the current developments in our world, but he is quoted saying, "Our time is the first in the memory of man, which has produced no images of the future or only negative ones." So it is safe to say that he did well in predicting the trajectory of our path. Moving on to the levels of future and defuture, we break it down into 6 categories: fashion and art, commerce, infrastructure, governance, culture, and nature. These are the 6 levels of pace in society when it comes to change, with fashion and art being the fastest pace and nature being the slowest. All 6 levels work together with one another, but they are most closely related to the level that directly follows each one. When looking at future and defuture, this shows us which ones are most likely to change rapidly and frequently, and which ones are most likely to change rarely or never at all. It is interesting to look at these levels in terms of the future, because you can easily see which ones hold the most sway over society. Mankind is more concerned with the now. They are more concerned with the present than the future, which is what ultimately leads to futurisms in some cases. Because of this, even though fashion and art may feel inferior when next to the other levels, they actually play a very important role. Expression is often presented through these art forms, which can lead a movement. On page 7 of the reading, Stuart Brand can be seen saying, "Fast gets all our attention, slow has all the power." At the end of the passage, he goes on to say that it may be helpful for the fast-paced layers like fashion to serve as a way to influence the slower, more powerful layers. And it is safe to say that we see this in our art. As a contemporary example of how these levels interact in the modern day, we can take a look at pictures such as the ones on the right, where we can see a variety of celebrities and government officials utilizing fashion to get their voice heard. These were at the Met Gala, the most prestigious fashion event of the year, so they knew that their attempts would not go unnoticed here. Underneath, that is a photo of a die-in, which was staged by PETA protesters to speak out against seal hunting. PETA is often in the news with people going to art museums and attempting to harm the art in protest. They also use their own bodies as art to show we are one and the same. They know that this is the kind of stuff that's going to get them coverage, bad or good, because people pay attention to fashion first and nature last. So this is a prime example of how the two can connect, even though they are on opposite ends of the scale. So what are the pros of the situation? Well, the good thing is that our future is not set in stone or on a linear path. Our future is ever-changing, and while some forms of defuturism are too far gone, others can be reversed or supplemented for. Changing cultures and views are also beginning to emerge over time, which is creating a generation of people that take the future of our population into account. With this, we can hope that certain defutures are avoided. And lastly, it is important to note that there are technologies and designs that continue to be developed that do better our society. We would not be where we are today without some of the technologies like automobiles, and while they may cause some harm, they also assist us. There just needs to be more checks and balances put into place. The cons are a bit more obvious in this context. Unfortunately, some defutures simply have created too much harm to the subject involved. Cultures and ethnic groups have been hurt and lost, and there are parts of our ecosystems that we will never be able to recover. Because of this, there is a heavy negative perception of our future placed in our media landscapes, which will never be erased. Awareness has been brought to these issues in part due to the coverage in film and entertainment, but the worry is that our society may be moving too slow to make a real difference in some of the futures that matter most. So, to go over some of my general thoughts and feelings about this particular reading, first and foremost, I found it very enlightening and engaging. I have read through past texts in this class and others alike that felt like the information was being thrown at me rather than me fully understanding the concepts that I was reading about. I really enjoyed the use of both past and present examples, and there were times in the reading where I would think, oh yeah, this relates to an event in the modern day, and then the author would go on to reference that same topic in the next paragraph. So I thought it was interesting how much I was able to relate my own knowledge to it. I also feel like it helped further my understanding of culture and technology. I never heard of the term defuture before, and at the very beginning of the reading, I was still a little lost on the topic. But as I continued, it began to make so much more sense in the context of our history and future. I also think it was really beneficial to the text that the author related the technology and designs to our environment and politics. I feel like this added an extra layer to the meaning of defuture because my generation is the one that I am talking about when I say that we are starting to become more aware of the effects we have had on the planet. Overall, this was a very informative article with challenging concepts, but it is because of the fact that they challenge us that we must speak on them. Thank you.